Over 20 years ago, crafting in games used to look like this. You opened a menu, pressed a button, waited a bit, and then you were done. And today, when AAA studios have budgets increasing to hundreds of millions of dollars, everything has improved. The graphics, the combat, the stories, but the crafting still looks like this. So here we are 20 years later, and the big studios have completely forgotten what made crafting fun in the first place. So in this video I'll show you exactly how AAA is holding back the entire gaming industry with their crafting systems. But I've also spent the last year trying to build my own crafting system to see if it can be fixed. So, in today's games, no matter what you play, you're most likely gonna find some form of crafting in it. It has gotten to a point where crafting is no longer added to games to make the game itself better, but to earn more money or to increase playtime by making longer mandatory grinds. So, if today's crafting systems are so bad, what did crafting look like to begin with and what went wrong? Well, as a kid I remember playing RuneScape on our family computer. At the time I didn't even understand English, so I had no idea what was actually going on. But here I fell in love with blacksmithing. The idea of getting my hands dirty, mining, melting and smithing new and better armor and weapons for me and my friends was all new to me, and I loved every second of it. I was the designated blacksmith, while my best friend's job was fishing and cooking. And this love for blacksmithing and crafting stayed with me growing up, and I kept looking for that same feeling in other games. But as I moved on to new games like Oblivion, I entered my favorite shop in my favorite town, dreaming of becoming this amazing blacksmith, only to be disappointed when the only crafting I could actually do was to use these little repair hammers on my existing gear. Even the game that would consume years of my life, World of Warcraft, there was tons of crafting with all its professions and things to do, but again I was disappointed. This didn't make me feel like a blacksmith at all. But right about this time, the entire gaming industry actually started to change. As the industry saw the massive success of World of Warcraft and a few years later Minecraft, they started realizing that people love crafting. These games had millions of players and earned tons of money. So to get a piece of the action, studios started to add crafting everywhere. And this is when the industry stopped looking at crafting as a core feature of a game, but instead something you could slap on top of it to earn more money. And this is when we got things like Far Cry 3, The Last of Us, Tomb Raider, Assassin's Creed and Horizon Zero Dawn. All games where the crafting feels exactly the same. A shallow system of collecting tedious materials, clicking menu after menu, only to get new things you have little to no use for. Even the games I consider the top RPGs of our time, like Skyrim, The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2 and Elden Ring, they all have systems where you walk up to this amazing looking blacksmith and just open a menu and spam click a button. Is this really supposed to make us feel like blacksmiths creating epic gear to kill dragons? Clearly, we're going in the wrong direction here. Over the years, crafting just never improved, and the AAA studios simply stopped trying. And now things are just getting worse and worse. So while we've had tons of indie games trying out new formulas of crafting, and even gotten games where the entire game is about crafting, the AAA studios have fallen asleep. So why is this happening, and what would it actually take to make crafting meaningful again? Well, after digging through dozens of games, the good and the bad ones, I found 7 things that really separate a shallow menu clicker from a crafting system that actually feels alive. The 7 things that the AAA industry has completely forgotten about. And first is the focus on creativity and customization. It's all about creating something unique and different that feels like yours, not just another dagger similar to the ones you've already looted 100 times. So being able to customize, experiment, discover and figure things out for yourself is so important for a good crafting system. Of course, the best example is Minecraft, where you literally can build any kind of base you want. But another example is also Breath of the Wild, where cooking with different ingredients can lead to surprising combinations and outcomes. Next is progression. Watching your skills improve, unlocking new gear, tools and potions that actually push you and your friends further is so important. Crafting in Far Cry 3, for example, is just crafting a new pouch to hold a couple more grenades, while in RuneScape, the crafting and skills are needed for quests, unlocking new areas, beating bosses, and letting you access content you literally couldn't reach otherwise. This makes crafting progression directly tied to the overall progression of the game itself. And next we have player goals and freedom. It's all about choosing your own goals, deciding what you want to build, and then chasing it step by step. Take The Last of Us Part 2 for example. Here all the upgrades basically follow a linear path. You don't really have to think about your decisions since you'll basically unlock everything anyways. While in Factorio for example, it's all up to you if you now want to spend time improving your defenses, set up a train connection to another iron deposit, or create a new smelting area for your iron. So being able to decide what you want to work towards next is often what separates a game from feeling rewarding from one that feels like a mandatory grind. Next we have exploration and discovery. A huge part of crafting is gathering all the different materials that you need, which you often find scattered around the world. But this can be done in very different ways. Take Skyrim for example, where gathering ingredients for alchemy means a lot of running around collecting butterflies and flowers. Compare this to Elden Ring, where if you want to upgrade the spirits that you can summon, you need the flower ghost gloveworts, which require you to find specific dungeons where they grow and fight your way through them. In both cases you're basically collecting flowers, but things feel very different. So properly rewarding players for exploring different parts of the world or overcoming challenges is so much more satisfying than simply scattering materials randomly around the world. And next up we have immersion, and this one is a big one for me. Good crafting systems shouldn't just be clicking through menus, it should be tied into the heart of the game, making you feel immersed into the world itself. In Red Dead Redemption 2 for example, you have this amazing world that you get to be a part of, but when it comes to the crafting, you simply open a flat menu, totally disconnecting you from everything else. While in the forest for example, you physically place sticks, rocks and things to assemble gear or buildings. So the act of crafting plays a huge role when it comes to immersion. And then we have the social aspect. In multiplayer games, being able to contribute to a shared progress or take on different roles make everything more fun. This can be, as mentioned previously, me being in charge of creating the best armor and weapons for our group, while others fix the food and potions. Or in Valheim for example, I'm fixing the defenses while my friends are making our house look better. So making a crafting system that supports teamwork is huge for MMOs and co-op games. And lastly, which in my opinion is the most important aspect, the one thing that actually makes crafting meaningful, and that is to have everything you craft have proper consequences. This means that you don't craft to make more arrow tips so you can continue shooting more of the same arrows you're already doing. You craft to make that new fire weapon so you can now defeat all the ice giants you couldn't beat before. Or you craft that new watering can that now makes your entire morning routine go much faster. Crafting shouldn't just be busy work, it should be changing or improving other aspects of the game. It should make you, your friends and your whole adventure feel different. In Terraria for example, crafting a grappling hook or wings completely changes traversal and combat. Suddenly you play the entire game differently. Okay, so all of these points sound good, right? But what have the AAA studios actually turned crafting into? Well, it has become completely disconnected from the world itself. You don't use anvils, workbenches or any stations, it's basically just a pop-up menu where you click a single craft button. And it's also become this way to create mandatory grinds and a way to block progression, forcing you to collect like 50 wolf pelts to progress. And this is all designed to slow you down and stretch out playtime. MMOs like New World for example are notorious for requiring absurd grinds just to progress your professions. And then we have the constant constant focus on loot drops from enemies and quests. And this often makes all the crafted gear that you spent time making get instantly outclassed or pointless by new drops. This often happens in Horizon Zero Dawn, Skyrim and Cyberpunk 2077, where most of the things you craft are actually worse than the drops from enemies, quests or vendors. And in recent years, more and more monetization has also crept its way into crafting systems, turning what should be about creativity and progression into paywalls and shortcuts. And here we have games like Diablo Immortal or Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where boosters and paid resource packs directly undercut progression. But the biggest problem is that when one studio sees all the other studios using these bad practices, the same shallow systems get copied over and over again, with more and more focus on how it can be used to earn more money, rather than focusing on what makes it fun. But don't get me wrong, in all of this chaos of AAA holding crafting back, we do have a lot of games that properly make crafting in what it deserves to be. And these are games like Factorio, The Forest, Valheim, Minecraft, Subnautica and Don't Starve. Games where the crafting does focus on creativity, progression, goals, exploration, immersion, collaboration and real consequences. But now the question is, can I take the lessons we've learned from these games and actually build something completely new and better myself? Well, I decided to find out. So, I've been working on my own game for a little while now, and trying to add a new type of crafting to it could either be the dumbest decision of my life, completely wasting a year, or it could make something new and interesting. Either way, I had to try. So, where do we even start? Between all of these, I decided to start with the aspect that I've missed the most, and that is immersion. I wanted to see if I can actually make crafting more than just opening a menu and pressing a button. But finding the right spot between making crafting more realistic but still fun was much harder than I thought. You see, too much realism and details makes crafting more complicated, boring and slow. And the more complicated it is, the more menus and tutorials you need. And you would also need details that the pixel art is too bulky to display unless you want a minigame for every small aspect of actually creating a sword. But in my opinion, minigames are often more immersion breaking than anything else. Except for this minigame, of course. But after looking at tons of different games that try to make crafting more interactive, I again and again felt that things got too complicated too quickly in these games. Until I remembered a game that perfectly combines the world interaction and fun in both a simple and intuitive way. And that is Overcooked 2. If you haven't played Overcooked, it's a game where you and your friends run around in different kitchens, trying to make different meals while chaotic things are happening around you, and your job is to fill as many orders as you can before the time runs out. Now, to be completely honest, I hate the stress part of this game. I get way too stressed by timers, but the way that you run around in the kitchen, cut and process different ingredients and create meals feels really good. So, is it possible to create a crafting system that feels as interactive as Overcooked 2, but is still fun when there are no timers and that still works in an RPG? Well, to answer that, we need the strongest tool that we game developers have, and that is paper prototypes. Instead of spending weeks coding and debugging a new system, you can use paper prototypes to test it out and interact with an extremely simplified version of your idea. And this can often show you what works and what doesn't so much faster. So we can start by imagining a blacksmith and a player, and try to add some crafting stations here, like a smelter, furnace, anvil, water and a grinder. And now it's time to figure out how to interact with all of these to go from a piece of copper ore into a copper sword. The goal here is that I want to be able to run around and interact with all of these things to actually make a sword. Now, it might sound easy to figure this out, but one of the most important things you gotta remember when it comes to game design is that the devil is in the details. Let's take this for example. Let's say I just smelted my copper ore into a copper bar and now want to take the copper bar to the furnace. How exactly do I do that? that? Remember, we want to try to avoid the use of menus as much as possible. Well, what if we just pick up the item, then it's added to your hotbar like we see in most crafting games, and then we can walk over here and place it down again. And sure, this works, but what happens if your hotbar is full? Then you have to open your inventory menu and move things around before you're able to use your item and place it down again. And if you're constantly opening menus and moving things around, the flow completely dies. The crafting stops feeling immersive and starts feeling like inventory management. Okay then, so can't you just skip having a hotbar and then simply pick the item up like in Overcooked? Sure, but this now means that you can only carry one single item in the world at a time. So what happens if you have two different smelters here and you want to melt copper ore here and iron ore here? Do you then have to open your inventory and then select the correct ore to hold every time before you can deposit it? Or do you then want like a selection wheel by the smelter before placing things down? Well, with a selection wheel we then have a menu again, which might slow down the interactions. So long story short, every system I tried was either too slow, too clunky or too limiting. But what if we could actually take the best parts of all of these ideas and combine it into a way that lets you have a hotbar like we're used to, but that also lets you pick up and move a single item? Okay, so what if we still have the hotbar here, but the twist now is how slot number 1 works. Slot number 1 acts as your hands. So if you go up to an item and press E, the item will always be added to slot number 1 and becomes your active item. And if there's already an item there, then the old item will be moved away to the first available slot in your inventory. While if you go up to an item and press F instead, it will be stashed away to the first free slot in your inventory that isn't slot number 1. Just like picking up an item normally works in other games. So effectively, E will always place the item in your hands and F will always store it somewhere else in your inventory. Now at this point we just have to try to implement it to see if it will actually work. So after a couple of months of solving tons of other problems as well, coding and implementing everything, a super early version was done. Okay, so welcome to the very first prototype of my crafting. I know it's probably confusing to see all of these crafting stations here at once, but just bear with me. Okay, so first of all, I made something I call a combat mode and a craft mode. So when you're in the combat mode, you can use your sword and do the different attacks to fight your enemies. But in the crafting mode, the hotbar appears and you can interact with all the different stations around here. But okay, so before we can even start crafting anything, we have to go gather some materials. So I'm just gonna skip a bit ahead here and kill these guys. And then we can mine our first copper deposit. And then you go to the crafting mode and you can simply start interacting with the deposit directly. So one of the things I wanted to avoid was to have your hotbar filled with different tools for different situations. In this game I wanted it to be a bit easier, so whenever you walk up to something you can simply start interacting with it at once and the correct tool will be selected for that job. So let's collect some wood here as well and let's see what else we can find.
One eternity later.
Alright, so now we probably have enough resources to start crafting something. So now our goal is to craft a copper sword. And how do you actually do that? Well, you start with this merge table. And I know I said I wanted to avoid menus as much as possible, but at some point you need some tutorials to show you how to actually make things. So here you can see to create a copper sword you need some different copper materials and a sword handle. And what we can do here is actually track this item. And by tracking it, you can actually see these ghost icons on the table as well. So all we have to do now is to create these different materials and we should be good to go. So first of all we need a sword handle, and I'll speed this up a bit as we go and try not to over-explain everything here. But here I'm going over to the woodworking area, and to make a sword handle we need to combine a few resources at the woodworking bench. So we have a couple of other stations here as well that lets you place down wood and transform it in different ways. One station cuts things in two, one station flattens wood, and one spins wood into thinner and thinner sticks. By the way, since this is a prototype, it's missing all of the animations and sound effects, so I know that the crafting might feel a bit flat at the moment. Anyways, once we combine all the required pieces, we got ourselves a sword handle. And now it's time for the blacksmithing part. And this time we need to melt some copper ore into copper bars, place them on the furnace to heat things up, and create some charcoal to fuel the furnace. So here, once we have the metal heated, we can actually start to mold it. Alright, so now we want a flat piece that's quite long, but how do we actually make that? And now we come to like the most confusing tutorial I have so far, but that's this one. Okay, so what's happening here is that I have 4 different anvils right here that all shapes the metal in different ways. So the anvil down flattens the metal, while the anvil up lifts the metal to make it higher. And the right anvil will stretch it out, and the left anvil will shorten it. So okay, if we want this piece right here, we see that it's quite flat and it's quite long. So what we have to do is first of all flatten this piece, and then we have to lengthen it. There we go. But you can see here that this piece doesn't quite look the same as the other one, and that is because what we have here is a heated rough metal piece. So what we have to do is first of all cool the metal piece down, and then we can actually grind it into a shiny one. There we go. And then we can actually place it down. So now we have to do the same for the other pieces. And I'll just speed this up a bit, but remember, the goal here is that you can craft different things in parallel as well. And when you get further in the game, some form of automation would probably be nice as well. And here we have all the pieces finally gathered, and then you can simply merge everything together into a copper sword. And when you switch over to the combat mode, you can now use your new copper sword. Okay, so another thing I wanted to show you is actually how you upgrade the different items. Now we have the copper sword right here, but this is the upgrade table. And here you can see if you merge a sword or any other armor piece with a smithing stone, you can now upgrade the item. So if we merge this together, you now get some options of what you want to upgrade. And it also shows what you have to do with the sword to actually upgrade it. So here we can add some fire damage, some extra defense, or just increase the slash damage. So let's do that one. And now whenever you hold this item, you can now see what's needed to actually finish the upgrade. So first of all, we need to heat the item. And now once it's heated, we can place it over here before we craft the last materials. So here again, I'm just running around making some copper pieces and also making some flux powder over here. Then I simply add all of these resources to the copper sword. There we go. And all we have to do now is cool down the sword before the upgrade is finished. There we go. And now we can equip the new sword with the upgraded stats. So okay, this was basically how the entire crafting prototype actually works. Now during this showcase I didn't really use any of these storage boxes at all, but here I can basically place as many as I want of the copper ore, for example, and then simply pick it up and take it with me over here if I don't want it down on my hotbar. So anyways, now we have the upgraded sword equipped and we can take it out with us and do a lot more damage when fighting other enemies. Okay, so again, this is just a prototype of a somewhat different crafting system than what I'm used to seeing in other games. And I would love to hear your thoughts on it and how I can make this even better, because it's definitely far from done. There are tons of things I haven't figured out yet. For example, customization. The recipes for a new sword right now doesn't really offer any kind of customization at all. There's a little customization in upgrading the sword, but I feel I want more than just that. And the biggest challenge with this solution is making sure that things don't get too tedious after a while, because it will get tedious if you have to continue crafting the same stick over and over again. So the playstyle itself needs to progress, evolve and change. So maybe adding some automation as you progress can help, so you don't have to keep making the same things over and over again. Maybe this can be done by having villagers do different work for you, or maybe you you can upgrade the stations themselves to do work automatically. Anyways, there are still a lot of things I have to figure out, but if you're actually interested in testing out the game this early, you can sign up to the email list at simonkv.com, and I will be inviting more testers soon. Or you can of course subscribe to follow the progress as I try to make this better. Anyways, I'm gonna keep trying to improve and expand on this crafting system, so we might just get a new type of crafting that's a bit different and hopefully a bit of fun as well. Anyways, thanks for watching and have an amazing day.